it is Dave, Duncan Kyle, back from Metal Epidemic for another... What was that?
Well, a couple of videos ago, depending on the chronology, Dave was pointing in different directions, trying to work out how things were going. I am just now like, I'm going to be surprised when you introduce me. Like, am I on the camera? I didn't realise that. What are we doing? Talking about albums. How quaint.
How quaint.
That is
Never
Duncan.
done that before.
That is Kyle. This is Metal Epidemic. We're here to talk about the new album from Parisian hardcore quartet.
Ooh.
Anasage. Yes, French. Surprised? No.
Quelle surprise, Dave. Quelle surprise.
The band's new self-titled album will be released on April 15th via Kolonosphere Records. So, this is the debut from Anasage after releasing EPs in 2014 and 2018. The album was produced by Francis Cast, also worked with Hangman's Chair, Rise of the North Star, Smart Crown, at Studio Saint Martha. So, completely new band for me, but you know, I'm a little bit of a connoisseur of the French metal.
I mean, I imagine that you have some algorithm that particularly screams all these album submissions for the word French.
100%.
And if it doesn't have that in there, in the fucking bin.
France, hardcore, check.
Yeah.
And this had both.
It's a double win.
And I think, like...
Does that mean they're from France, they make hardcore, and they send you the check?
You'll never know.
Never know.
I think like we've obviously got a bunch of album reviews this week. I think like out of the albums we're reviewing this week, when it comes to like split your anus in half violence, this album wins. Like the award for anus splitting goes to Anasage. You know, it's
interesting.
Can you
because
imagine that trophy?
I was going to say it's interesting that you should see that.
Half
'Cause
a
the French word for anus splitting is Anasage. So there you go.
I was going to say like the name. It's not the most metal of band names, you know what I mean? But if it's, you know, if it translates into anus splitter or whatever.
I'm also going to say that I was particularly bad at French at school. So
okay.
I may be wrong and it might just be a name. And we're all lying here. We've done our due diligence. We have Googled the name.
Intelligence, yeah.
There was theories in the background that maybe it was to do with the humble Greg's sausage roll. And it's not at all. This woman worked hard for her cash.
She worked hard for money.
Dear. She was your private dancer. Should do what you want me to do.
She
wasn't Tina Turner. She was a lady in red. That's right. She was a prostitute that brought down Dillinger. Which, I mean, if that's your Tinder bio, you're doing well. You know what I mean? I don't know what direction you swipe, but I'm giving it the positive swipe, which is also what I call every time I go to an STD clinic. A positive swipe. Come on, people. Check, please. Right. So, Anasage, French hardcore. Dave's in. Like, Dave couldn't be any more in, and it is particularly violent.
It is, yeah. Like, the name not so much, but the sound is like an
anus
audible
splitting apart.
Anus splitting, yeah. An audible texture of barbed wire, basically.
I like it.
Yeah, they class themselves as a kind of chaotic hardcore, and you can hear that from the first track. It's got a bit of that kind of Converge, the Chariot, or kind of like Gaza type kind of streak about it. But there's there's a couple of wee surprises in there throughout the album, which we'll get to. But Duncan, I'm going to come at you first.
Of course,
I want to hear what you think of Anasage first.
As being an expert of French hardcore, it makes logical sense to come to Duncan first.
Just mix things up, you know.
So for those that don't know it, the hardcore scene was bustling in France in 1973. It was a difficult time for everyone involved. Viva la France. I knew, but once again, I don't read the blurb, which ignorance is sometimes bliss when it comes to these reviews. So when I came into this one, I genuinely had no idea what to expect at all, very much like Dave. The band name intrigued me, whilst at the same time giving absolutely fuck all away to what they might sound like. There is not even a band logo on the artwork. So once again, I can't be like squinting my eyes like it's a magic picture going, oh, well, this is clearly a black metal album. I couldn't do that. And from the off, this album has pretty much, with the couple of exceptions, pretty much one tone, and that tone is violence from start to finish. And it is done incredibly well. Amongst the aforementioned bands that Dave would say, or did say at the start, I would say that you also get a healthy amount of, wait for it, Dillinger Escape Planet parts. Very difficult to be chaotic and not be linked back, but it's not. I don't think I don't think it's as chaotic as Dillinger, which is kind of good. Very few bands can do that, but it's also used very smartly in the songwriting. Like, as in, it's not just we need to fill a section, just play everything all at once, like 3 times the speed it is, and just hit any chord, and then that's cool. It surprisingly fits in. There is also a hefty bit of Every Time I Die in here, which made me smile quite a bit on the riffage, not on the vocals, but definitely on the riffage. They're not afraid to throw in a little rock hook, a little twist on the end, which I thoroughly enjoyed as well. But to just even go down that road of just saying that's what the band sounds like is really doing an injustice to the complexities of the album as a whole. The design, the architecture of the whole album is to maximize the impact of absolutely everything they do, and as a result of that, very few times on this album did I feel like a riff was overused. In fact, there were a couple of songs where I kind of felt like, right, we're going to go back to that. We're not going back. All right, fine. All right, I will just sit here. I will listen to this track again so I can hear that riff again. They kind of kept me on my toes all the way through in a really cool way. That can become exhausting when you listen to, once again, certain bands that class themselves as chaotic. I think there's a substitution for chaos over good songwriting, and there is a very fine balance to that, and very few bands get it right. I think the most recent example we've heard of a band that nailed that was something like Pupil Slicer, which really kind of caught onto that. This is just out and out mania, but actually contextually fits really, really well in the song, and you get that here, but has a surprising amount on the Anna Sage album of moments that kind of took me back a little bit. The kind of the through line between Loveless and To V, for example, which is a track that closes out and then brings into the next one, really, really worked. And V is a surprising highlight for this album. For me, I actually thought it worked incredibly well. It showed a bit more depth overall to the sound and another string in the bow. And they aren't afraid to do that on other tracks either. Track 10, Silence, is one of the highlights for me because it started using, once again, some examples of that chaos, some examples of that hardcore, but then also brought in moments of kind of more melody and started infusing them into the mix. And that's kind of where I found my respect for the band more than anything, is that, like I said before, it's very easy just to be the most extreme, aggressive thing out there. You can just keep writing riffs that are designed to punish the audience, and you know, people will enjoy that. But to me, the craft of good songwriting, specifically in the context of an album, is finding that balance of where you can inject the stuff that you can do out with that, specifically melody. And Anna Sage can do it, like whether it's parts on the guitar, it's stuff that's bedded into the background, or it's just an interesting play on what they do in terms of the transitions between, a chorus into an interlude. I think some of that really, really stood out to me. So I think doesn't surprise me they've got a couple of EPs out before this. Also doesn't surprise me that there was long periods of time in between those EPs, because it does sound like they spend time crafting the tracks well.
Yeah.
And this is not the sort of thing you can just bang together on a weekend. This is, this has to do justice to the songwriting and the ability. And I think they do that really, really well. I think vocally, this guy's tone is savage. Absolutely fucking, or should I say, savage. It just really, like, at times, like, it was that way where you were just kind of wincing just a little bit because it sounded sore. And then how that linked into the production. I love the production on this one. I thought this, not your typical French production, which surprised me. That's why I didn't think they were French until you mentioned it, Dave. So I had a ton of American jokes that will now be transitioned on to the next American album that we do. And somehow I'll just substitute. I'll do an auto find for Anna Sage and replace it with whatever band we're doing. But it doesn't, like, we tend to see like French productions being at times kind of cold. And that would totally fit their sound if they wanted to go down that way. But there's a warmth to the production that I really, really enjoyed. Everything is nice and clear and audible. And like I say, they use the technique of linking up certain tracks on this more than once in a good way, not just in a kind of, right, let's just go to the next track, let's just fade in. There's a sound or there's a something which will connect in those tracks, and I really enjoyed that as well. Not much to dislike here, I would say. I don't necessarily think they do anything supremely original. Like I said before, from the aforementioned bands, we're covering all the bases here. That being said, and I've said this before, in the wake of a world where Dillinger Escape Plan aren't an active band anymore, Every Time I Die aren't an active band anymore, and hardcore's on the rise, there is plenty of room for Anna Sage to kind of siphon off some fans that are already aligned to those other bands and build up a strong fan base. This one was surprising. This was the one of the three that I listened to last because I was expecting fuck all from it because of the name, and genuinely kind of felt, at the same time I'm glad I listened to this as the last one because a bit rat-a-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat, you know what I mean? A wee bit chaos, you know what I mean? A wee bit ratatouille. That's a French movie, isn't it? Right. Let's move on. I thought this was fun. I thought it was like surprisingly aggressive. Kind of, I was going to say it does exactly what it says in the tin. It doesn't really. Anna Sage isn't in the tin. But it delivers a surprising amount of aggression and attitude and swagger and really clever songwriting in a very condensed package. It's like 40 minutes long and you get 11 songs. Very easy to spin on again and again, but try and pick your moods right. If you're looking for something, maybe to close out the day with a glass of Chardonnay, Anna Sage is not your friend.
Okay.
What happens when you come to me first, Dave?
Beautiful. French kiss.
There's a rhyme in there and everything.
Not a French kiss, a chef's kiss. Okay. Give you a French kiss later.
Dave's slipping the tongue. Not without my consent, Dave, which you know you have already.
French chef's kiss. Let me try that.
That is a harassment lawsuit coming. Jesus.
Kyle, what do you think of Anna Sage?
Thanks for having me follow that up.
Not a problem.
Honestly, I feel much the same way. It's surprisingly, I didn't know what to think with the name either. I thought it was like, honestly, when I first saw the name, I was like, okay, it's a lady singing, you know, I don't know what this is going to be, is it? You know, obviously metal, but had no idea what I was getting into. But no, it was, it's fucking intense, this album. But it's not like intense to the point of annoyance. It keeps you on your seat, but it doesn't get tiring throughout the run of the album, which isn't the longest album, is it? It's about half hour, I guess, something like that.
42 minutes, Kyle. That's how much it flew in for you.
Yeah, there we go. 42 minutes. Actually, wow. That's actually a lot longer than I thought it was.
It's that Dave. I was going to say it's that Dave Anus splitting, which is a bad nickname. It's that this description that Dave did about it does have an intensity and a pace to it that doesn't really let up much at all. So it does feel a lot shorter on the list than it actually is.
Yeah, it does, absolutely. But I know the thing is, there's a few surprises in there. Like they know how to slow down and make it quiet. Like in a few transitions through a few songs and stuff, they know exactly how to do that, and it works really well. And I thought those little moments of slowing it down and pulling things back was to their favor. Because I mean, just going all out intense all the time, it does get tiring. But they managed to keep it very varied and very sort of. There's lots of different things that you can hook onto and listen through, and it's not all the same all the time, even though it is really quick and intense all the way through. Still, and that guitar tone is fucking ripping. I love it. Like it's so heavy on the chugs and so like, what's the word? Like scratching in your ears when it goes really up high.
Chainsaw.
Yeah, like a chainsaw. Except
skin your ass raw.
Yeah.
The day keeps going this way. Can't not do it. Whenever anyone says chainsaw, that's what comes to mind. Damn you, Fred Durst.
I was thinking of the word abrasive, but yeah.
Oh, that'll work as well.
Yeah.
Less difficult to find that word than a Limp Bizkit.
Yeah.
Not impossible to rhyme abrasive, but it's Fred Durst we're talking about here. So.
My first note is, do they like Dillinger?
Yeah.
Clearly an influence, but I mean, they haven't gone full nuts.
No.
So, I mean, they've pulled it back a little bit. And I think they've managed to carve out somewhat of a unique sound. It's not the most original thing I've ever heard, but if they put one of these songs on in a group of other hardcore, I'd be like, oh, that's Anasage. I think we'd be able to pick it out pretty easily. So, and the production is really, really good. I don't detect too much studio fuckery. There might be some in there, but it's not overly done. It's not overproduced. It's a really good production. Things sound, nice and natural and clear, but not super overproduced. So, really, yeah. Okay. Liked it quite a lot, actually. A lot more than I thought I would, hearing it's a hardcore album. Not a huge fan of hardcore, but yeah, no.
And then this is what we call a segue onto a big fan of hardcore, Big Davey Hardcore.
On his segue.
Yeah, I mean, like, I kind of thought, had an idea how this was going to go from the first track. And then the second track kicked in, Thunder Ablaze. And then there's this section in that track where they kind of come off the gas and start feeding in a bit of, like, really kind of dark melody in the guitars. The first thing I thought when I heard it was Will Haven. Like, as soon as
there's a big old dose of Will Haven in here as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Like, and they hit you with this, like, right after that, they hit you with this kind of huge kind of passage of thick, really almost like kind of like post-metal type guitars, and that kind of really piqued my interest. I was like, oh, wait a minute, I did not see that coming at all. But I think those sections, the kind of, it's almost got kind of gloomy melody and the kind of post-metal, they're squeezed in amongst the chaos just enough for it to kind of break up the intensity.
Yeah.
Because like this album could quite easily have become overly repetitive. This particular style, if it's not handled correctly, it can just, it can become like white noise after a while. But I think they did a good job, especially with the kind of use of that kind of subtle melody in the guitars, of not letting that happen too much.
That was Dillinger's big selling point. That's why a lot of people, I think, don't understand. They accused them of selling out because there was more melody and more weird industrial atmospherics in their albums. That's there for a reason. You take that out and it is just all a wall of chaos.
Yep, for sure.
Which their early stuff was, and I don't revisit their early stuff nearly as much as I do to the stuff that's just got a better craft to it. So I think they're onto that sort of balance here.
Yeah. I think, for me, there was still a couple of areas where it does feel like we might be like treading over familiar ground, but I like the fact that they have that other kind of side to them in their back pocket when they can switch the tempo or tone into something a bit moodier. I thought like track 5 was a really good example of that. Definitely a good idea having that less kind of abrasive track in the middle where they go a bit deeper on the big kind of post-metal chords and drop the pace of the album down a shade, for a couple of minutes anyway. My kind of favourite moment of the album was track 6, Hostile Cage, which is, well, basically every Nicolas Cage movie now as well, but the kind of the kind of like kind of jaggier, like,
just drop that in there.
But the thing is, he said it now, so like what he doesn't understand is some screenwriters now going to see this, and there's going to be a movie called Hostile Cage. I'm gonna have to sit through.
Yeah, I'll sit through that.
Also, anything that guy's in, I'll watch in a second. So,
but that track had a bit kind of the rhythms were a bit more angular, and it made it a more interesting track. It's one of the tracks that kind of felt like really stood out. There's also a bit of a blackened feel to it as well, which tonally again switches up the feel of the album in a good way. Double Bind was another track that kind of caught my attention. I felt like vocally this album did stay within a particular domain, like it's visceral, and the man Xavier, he's got a killer tone, but it doesn't really vary much from that like scathing like hardcore vocal. But on Double Bind there's some really cool kind of melody coming through, and again it kind of like my mind went to like Grady from Will Haven, that type of vibe. And if anything, I'd say like maybe even lean more into that on the next album, because I thought that was a really cool contrast against that like more kind of scorched vocal style. I really enjoyed the album closer as well, the Serpents. Actually, it reminded me a little of a Danish band we checked out last year called Eyes.
Yes.
This is maybe a little heavier, but the overall tone and the attack kind of reminded me of those guys. And there's an absolute riff in the middle of that track, which could be my favourite kind of like breakdown, I suppose you could call it, type moment of the track, of the album, but just really like dissonant guitar chugs, and it builds into a real kind of groove on that track. I really like that. I think, overall, I think there's moments where I really feel like this band are onto something with the blend of styles and the way they move from those styles, one into another, very seamless, and it doesn't sound like glued together at all. And when they want to kind of grab you with something sonically, they really deliver. Like, there are other moments where I felt like they were a little bit more forgettable. Like some tracks maybe kind of pass by with not enough of something to latch onto or stick with me afterwards. But vocally, I love the guy's voice. Like, it is just pure, unbridled rage. And I think he has more diversity in the tank than he lets on, to be honest.
I think so as well, yeah.
Not necessarily from an aggressive side of things, because he delivers that in spades, but I'd like to hear more of that. It dropped in a little bit of melody on that track, and I was like, oh, I kind of want to hear more of that. I thought it worked amazingly well on Double Bind, and I think some more of that might help those tracks that didn't stand out for me quite as much kind of come more to the kind of forefront. I agree with you guys, production's fantastic. It is raw, but it's got power, and it doesn't feel like overly processed. And when those kind of bigger moments, the kind of post-metal type parts sweep in, it sounds fantastic. It's French kissed. Yeah. Anna Sage.
Anna Sage does it for Dave.
Anna Sage. So ratings. What are we thinking, Duncan?
So many Sage jokes now. I'm not going to do any of them.
Okay.
I'm not doing any of them, and I'm just going to give you my grade, which is a 4 out of 5. I think there's loads to love on this.
Yeah.
Like I said, there's plenty of inroads. Any of the bands we've mentioned on this review, if you're a fan of those, there's enough in here for you to get your hooks into. They're going to be a really interesting one, because this scene just now, particularly France is batting hard with a lot of music. This scene is starting to kind of explode. It'll be interesting to see what niche they carve out this year specifically. I look forward to hearing their name in the future. 4 out of 5.
Nice. Kyle?
I'm going to give it exactly the same. 4 out of 5. Because same reasons, yeah. It's really, really great to listen to. It's like, if you like that sort of hardcore but slightly mathy feel, then go for it. It's fucking awesome. Yeah.
I'll agree. It's a 4 for me. That's a 4 out of 5. For Anna Sage. Don't know why. Anna Sage, self-titled debut album, out on April 15th on Kolonosphere Records. I'll put some links below to Facebook, Bandcamp, all that stuff. Check them out and let us know what you think. Stick some comments in below. That is the review. Thank you so much for checking it out. Much appreciated. We'll be back with another review very soon, but until then, take care. Speak to you soon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.